was a little bit scary. You know, I think I've had a couple surgeries in my career. You know, I've had things that I've had to deal with, an ankle or knee, Achilles, calf, whatever it might be. You know, but those are all things that you go to rehab, you deal with it like that, like an athlete would. So, I'm thinking that's what I was going into, and then you see you have a blood clot, and obviously that's a thing that can affect your life. And I got kids, I got a big family, I'm tight with my family, so automatically I start thinking about, what it could mean for me personally. So that was the scariest part. One of my closest cousins in 2021 had a blood clot in his calf, and didn't know, during COVID they couldn't get him in because it was, everything was on Zoom, and he ended up having a pulmonary embolism and dying. So obviously that's the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm just happy to be on the other side of it. I mean, I was at dinner and I could, usually if I have a strain, I can feel it when I walk. I know what that felt like because I was familiar with it. But I was at dinner and my leg just felt swollen. It was like super tight, and that was kind of what led me to go to the team in the first place, because I was just like, this ain't normal, So, I went from there. That first couple of days when I first started to feel it, it was obvious that it was there. I didn't know it was a blood clot, but once I found out that's what it was, I knew what it was. Why it was so sore and swollen. But then after, I would say like 4 or 5 days, I felt normal. I felt like I could physically do anything I could do before, but the fact was that, I still had a blood clot in my leg. So just being patient and not being in pain, but also knowing that, it was still a problem there was, that was one of the hardest things. When I say I was scared, I was really nervous about it based off of a past experience. So I really wasn't thinking about, I need to get back out there for the playoffs. I was just like, each time I went back to the hospital, I wanted to hear like it's gone or like it's smaller, it's in the same spot. So that was more of my focus. I had been meeting with, a few specialists, and they allowed me to do certain exercises. So I knew that, if there was a chance that I could come back and play, I didn't want to just be sitting around doing nothing. So I was, doing all of those things on the bike, lifting, in the pool, the skiing, the skiers, trying to get my heart rate up. All of those things so that my body was strong in some form of condition. And, when I was able to return to the court, that I wouldn't feel like, I had been through a whole offseason. I didn't really ask questions about when can I play. I was just like, how long do these usually take to go away, before it's not an issue? And a lot of times, they give you the timelines that they would give anybody. And the term that they kept using was like, you're not a 65-year-old person coming in that, usually would have a blood clot. It's like you're a 34-year-old athlete, you're in good shape, your body is strong. That was kind of like the language that they used. But I would say what made it a different thing is I was able to go in weekly. That's not the usual protocol. It's like, if it's something where you're on a blood thinning medication, I feel like it's a more drawn out process where they'll just go that route, as opposed to me going in every week, doing labs, getting the ultrasound. I was kind of going in each week, just monitoring it like inch by inch pretty much, just to see if it was like even a little progress, or just to make sure that it was going how I wanted it to go. And I think that's how it was such a quick turnaround, because we was able to monitor it so closely, as opposed to it possibly going away, and then I don't have an appointment for another month, and then we would never know if it had been gone for the entire time. So that's what I think, but I mean, I'm not the specialist. It was just like, we don't see this, and for me, I was just like, it was a different experience for me, because I went in there a bunch of times and it was the same size. So I'm like, it didn't seem that special. And then it just reached a point where it just got a lot smaller out of nowhere. But they did say that. I mean, I think just looking at the time that I spent, you know, just not playing and the millions of thoughts that went through my head, like, man, what if this, what if that? You know, I was panicking, you know, my back randomly started hurting, my chest started hurting. I'm like, man, is it moving? I'm thinking all kind of stuff. But looking back at it, I just think you just gotta not take, you know, each day for granted, because you know, you never know when an issue could come up, you know, and obviously there's people with way worse issues than I've dealt with, you know, so I don't want to be dramatic about it, but you just never know, you know, when something could come up and change your life. You know, it's been guys like Chris Bosh who dealt with this, and then it's another issue, and it could be a career-ending thing. So I think you just can't take days and opportunities and things in your life for granted. You know, that's kind of how I look back at the experience.